All right, everybody. We are back with another episode here. Today, joining me is Mr. Jackson Durham. How are we doing today?
I am doing great, my man. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's an awesome to be
Absolutely.
here.
Yeah. So, for the people that don't know, how did you start covering the Rams?
So, I have been a Rams fan since I started really caring about the NFL. I grew up in Oklahoma, big Sooners fan. And when they drafted Bradford, so Oklahoma doesn't have an NFL team, I just followed Bradford to the Rams and stuck with them ever since. And then I started doing independent football coverage in 2020 during the pandemic, started a TikTok account and eventually kind of parlayed that into a job with a company called Chad Sports. And they have assigned me since to covering the Rams. So that's how we got to do it full time.
Yeah, that's great. And then, aside from the Super Bowl win, that's an easy one. What's your favorite Rams game over the past couple of years?
Favorite Rams game over the last couple of years. I think I'll always have really fond memories of the divisional win over Tampa Bay and the big completion to Cooper
Yeah.
Kupp down the field. I remember screaming, like, yes, like we got it on that one. And absolutely crazy. Because I thought Tom was going to get us. It just anytime you're in a close game with Tom Brady, you can't really feel too comfortable. And we pulled that one out.
Yeah. So, what would you say was your first reaction when they picked Ty Simpson last Thursday?
My God, that was absolutely my first reaction. I remember I was standing in. So the way we cover the draft at Chad Sports, a lot of our channels are live. And Rams being one of our newer ones, it wasn't quite at that point where it was ready to be live yet. So I was doing mostly bullpen support, which is just kind of running around helping other channels and following the draft and seeing what they needed. And as I round the corner, because I knew obviously our pick came in a little early because we got that Glazer report. So I rounded the corner and there were 5 guys huddled together on their phones. And I hadn't been on my phone in 5 or 6 minutes. And they go, the Rams just picked Ty Simpson. And I was in disbelief. I was like, there's no way. Like, we're not even on the clock yet. Like, how did we pick Ty Simpson? Like, that can't be happening. I feel like there was a moment of denial. And then the more that I thought about it, the more I have really come around. And we can get into that more. But what was your immediate reaction to it?
Yeah, kind of like you said, just really a little bit of like it was like shocked. I was shocked. I got like everybody else, I got the notification. I don't watch the draft because I think it's especially the first night, it's a lot of theatrics. I follow along just kind of as the picks go on. And it's like the whole thing takes just way too long. I understand the media hype and everything around it, but I kind of just follow along and I look at the big board and everything as picks are going on. And I'm looking as the Rams are coming up. Got a great set of prospects and everything. Mekhi Lemon, still had Ruben Bain on the board, and I was like, ooh, if there's not like, a good run on those guys right here, I feel like they would be in a really good position to pick like pretty much whoever they wanted out of the top like 15 guys, which it ended up being the case. But then they went and chose Ty Simpson. I was like, that's interesting. And honestly, I don't even remember, but a couple weeks ago, there was some report that they were interested in him or from someone, and I had posted about it even on our social media. I don't even remember doing that. And then I looked back and I was like, oh, so I guess there was a little bit of like breadcrumb hints, but like you said too, as well, like it's kind of grown on me. And when you think about it for the future, there's not going to be another time, hopefully, where they're picking in the top 15. They're hopefully going to be picking at 32 next year if all goes well. So I think that if they were confident that this is our guy, we're going to go and get him, like why not just go and get him, because then next year, who knows? It could be Sellers and Manning and all those guys, and they could all go in the top 10 and they're down at, 32. There's no way they're going to get one of those top guys. So who knows? So I think it's definitely grown on me, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge component of the decision. If we want to dive into Ty more here, I think people love to hear about Ty at this point. Really, they either love or hate it, to be honest with you. It's a pretty split. But I think if you're the Rams, I think they've earned more cachet than most NFL franchises. I think Sean McVay and Les Snead's decision-making process has to be, I think, respected a little bit more than your average NFL teams with what they've been able to accomplish. And so putting, like, obviously the initial shock, I think you feel like you put that aside and you start to dive into who Ty Simpson is, and you start to dive into the tape and what he could potentially bring to this team when he does eventually take over. And I think you just get more and more excited about it, especially like, I think a huge component of that decision is ultimately Ty's journey at Alabama will mirror his journey with the Rams if all goes to plan at the end of the day. I mean, he's probably going to sit for 2-3 years if we can get Matthew Stafford back. Who knows at this point? I'm not really going to guess what Stafford is going to do long term. I don't even think he knows if he's playing in 2027 or not at this point. But I think Ty Simpson, more so than maybe most, is ready to sit and learn and values the opportunity. The way that I've heard him speak about it, and you go back and you listen to even before he got drafted, the Gruden QB class. If you guys haven't had the opportunity to sit down and watch that, absolutely worth the hour of your time to get to know Ty a little bit more. And just kind of the student of the game that he is, and the way he valued the opportunity to sit behind Bryce Young and Jalen Hurts, both guys who've gone on to have successful NFL careers, the way he continues to lean on those guys as mentor figures and values their input, the way he worked with Nick Saban, who's obviously one of the greatest defensive minds in football history, was challenged by him every single day in practice, but only got all of that because he was able to embrace the role of being a backup. And so I think he values and understands the value of his role, and that's the role he's likely to play for multiple years. So I think that's another reason why, if you're the Rams, you're attracted to that decision, because you know there's not going to be like a lot of controversy with this kid chomping at the bit to get in there with Matthew Stafford as the starter. He respects Stafford. He knows that this is Stafford's team.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I think that he's an incredible football mind. From what I've seen, he processes really well. And I think that that's something also you need to run the Sean McVay offense, is be able to see the field and just kind of make your reads really quickly. But I think what most people, from what I'm hearing, and a little bit of my own sentiment as well, is that if you're saying that you want Ty Simpson and then they got Ty Simpson, you're saying that him or any other prospect wouldn't have made the team any better. So like, let's say Mekhi Lemon, for example. Would Mekhi Lemon have made the wide receiver 3 spot better than any of the other prospects on the board? Would Ruben Bain have made that defensive end spot better than any of the people on the team right now? And obviously, with that pick in mind, that's what they're saying. They're saying, yes, we're so confident in our roster right now that we're comfortable picking Ty Simpson. And I think that was something that I was saying as well before the draft, is that they're in a spot with this roster where I feel like they were allowed to make this like luxury sort of pick. And I think actually Ty Simpson is a luxury sort of pick, but it's not really what I was thinking when I made that statement, but that's ended up what it ended up being, actually.
Yeah, I think that phrasing on it is really accurate, that luxury pick. I think another way to look at it, and I think another way that the Rams organizationally do look at things, is the pick itself is a luxury pick. They weren't ever supposed to be picking at 13. They only did that because of a really smart trade with Atlanta in 2025. Atlanta, for God knows what reason, offered them their first round pick in the 2026 draft to move down, I think it was 20 spots. Or move up 20 spots, excuse me. They come up, take James Pierce. We get an extra first in 2026 and take Terrence Ferguson. And so I think they viewed this whole situation as like, okay, hey, we spent our own first rounder on Trent McDuffie. That was the here and now play. That's part of our draft class. If you're the Rams, and especially the way his contract is structured, which is a whole nother conversation, but they view him absolutely as part of the acquisitions made in the 2026 draft class. There's just no other way to view it. And so therefore, in their minds, one pick was spent on winning championships right now. And so the other can be spent on the future, because I think you truly cannot understand what the Rams do and why without remembering 2022. The context of 2022 and trying to avoid what happened in 2022 again, if you do win the Super Bowl, as you plan to do this year, is influencing a lot of these decisions. I am absolutely sure of that. It's in the back of the mind of Les Snead and Sean McVay with everything they do that, hey, we won the Super Bowl and went 5-12 the next year because we were not prepared, because we did not have the right kind of depth to sustain the veteran losses we had because of the salary cap crunch, not have the right kind of depth to sustain the injuries we took on. How do we avoid that ever happening again? How do we remain competitive on a year-to-year basis, not just go all in on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on the head. And looking at this depth chart right now, is there any one position or different position groups that you would feel are the weakest? Because I have a couple in mind, but I want to hear your first.
For me right now, now it probably comes down to that third receiver spot. I still think is the biggest question on this roster. I think, like, do you trust Mutfield? Do you trust Whittington? Are those guys ready to step up into bigger roles? Whose job even is that at this point? Is it CJ Daniels' job? I like a lot of his tape, but he wasn't overly productive at the Power 5 level when he did get there. So yeah, I think there's questions with that as well. But obviously that's a conversation that I think everyone has kind of beaten to death. To some degree. I also have questions about inside linebacker, though. And I know the Rams have never organizationally valued this position, and they kind of continue to show us that year after year that they just don't really care about the inside linebacker spot, and they're content to roll with end of roster guys at that spot and UDFAs and basically whoever they can find to make it work. Not having drafted earlier than 103rd overall for an inside linebacker since 2012's pick of Alec Ogletree. It's just not something Les Snead's really interested in doing. But I do get worried about the depth at that spot. And I do feel like it was a big part of why you went down to Seattle last year, just being unable to consistently fill run gaps and cover over the middle. Like, I don't feel like Omar Speights, and I think Nate Landman needs a little bit more competition in that room, or at least a little bit more support.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way. Like you said, wide receiver 3, that's an interesting spot because you have 3 guys that are kind of competing for it. You have Whittington, you have Smith, and then you have Daniels as well. So I think that'll be something that maybe
over Mutfield in there.
I mean,
I feel like Mutfield's really earning his opportunities. I feel like Xavier, and that's an interesting conversation to have. Xavier definitely factors in for sure.
Yeah. Honestly, I was really surprised when I went to go make a graphic a couple weeks ago that I was like, Xavier Smith was like secretly 3rd in receiving yards in the wide receiver room. I was like, I didn't even think that was something that happened last year. Like,
yeah,
I was convinced that it was going to be Whittington.
Yeah, I think Whittington, I mean, the hamstring cost him a little bit, but I think ultimately with Xavier Smith, and what does have an opportunity to remain his role, is he ended up kind of being what they were hoping Tutu might be, like kind of the field stretcher of that offense with the speed that he offers. I just think, like, and I know Rams fans don't like Xavier Smith right now, and I understand why. It's going to be hard for Rams fans just as a collective to move past what happened in the NFC Championship game. I absolutely understand that. But the Rams want this kid around. They picked up the ERFA tender, and I mean, it would have been kind of silly not to. It's dirt cheap to tender for an ERFA contract, but they want him around. They feel like he could be a productive part of this offense. I think he's going to compete with Mutfield, but I'm expecting Mutfield to take that big step this season. I liked his tape coming out of Pitt. I liked the way he fit into this offense. And I think CJ Daniels too is sneaky. I liked what John McKay, Rams assistant general manager, said about him. I don't know if you caught that, where he said he's one of the last players on the board that we felt could impact our team this year. And I don't think he said that just for no reason. You know what I mean? Like, I do think there is a year one role designed for CJ Daniels.
Yeah. On my last episode, when I was talking with Tuna, we were saying that even if you don't get that first round wide receiver, which they didn't, then, Coach Yarber can go and say, hey, I like these 3 guys, or whatever set of guys. Give me those guys. I can work with late round receivers. What I've done my entire career here. Like, why not just throw a dart at a late round guy and develop over the summer, and then, have him take that next step, like we've seen with all these late round guys that just end up being really well. That was something that I asked the guys at training camp too. Whittington, and I asked Jarquez Hunter, I asked Omar Speights and Kinchins all the same question. I said, what are some of the ways that the Rams as an organization have helped you develop as a player, and the fact that, coming out of college and coming into the draft, you were not a first or second rounder, because they were all 3rd round or later. How have they helped you as, this pick that hasn't meant to be, a starter in their first year? How have they helped you develop? And a lot of them said the same thing. There's a couple answers I got were really interesting, where they were just saying how the coaches end up playing to the players' strengths a lot, and they're not going to make you and put you in a position that you're not going to do well in, which I feel like should be, pretty easy of a coaching point. But I don't know if that's something maybe other teams aren't doing, if they're trying to make a primarily man corner play a lot of zone or something like that. But I feel like them kind of listening a lot to the players and the coaches in turn helping them out has helped this team like exponentially.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes from the Rams knowing what they want. Yeah. I think whereas other teams go through change and turmoil and all of these differences in the way they run their systems, the Rams have been steady for going on a decade, and that lack of change, obviously there's innovation that comes every year with Sean McVay, but that general static nature of this offense and what it is at its core. Obviously, the defense has seen a little bit of change with different guys coordinating, but generally a lot of the same concepts. That static nature allows the Rams to identify archetypes that work for their systems and draft those archetypes, knowing like, hey, we need receivers who can participate in run blocking. And we prefer guys who have a lot of gameplay under their belt. Like if you look at the average Rams draft pick, and I haven't charted this out, I do plan to at some point, I would guess that the guy has played 30 plus games of football, 20 plus games of football, most likely at the very least, is 22, 23 years old, most likely. They like an older prospect. And I find it interesting to your point that despite drafting what most people would not consider a developmental prospect, a guy with tons of room to grow, older guys who've played a lot of football, they find a way to mine out what development remains from almost everybody that the obvious development archetypes or drafting obvious development archetypes. You know what I mean? Like they're not going for Caden Proctor at the end of the day, who obviously has such a crazy high ceiling if you can hit it. They're not going for Peter Woods, those types of guys who have incredibly high developmental ceilings. Occasionally they do, but generally that's not really what they're looking for. And they still find a way to get the most out of those guys and to get solid development out of those guys. I think it really speaks to, like you said, to the coaching and to the just entire system that they have in that organization.
I have never seen really in the past couple of years the Rams get mocked someone and then they end up taking that player. Like I think maybe Jared Verse was an exception because I saw a couple of Jared Verse picks before he got drafted, but I don't think I've ever seen a Rams mock where it was really the most popular or, most touted prospect coming out of college. And I think that sort of contributes to, like you were just saying, they don't really want, the most athletic guy necessarily. They want the guy that best fits what they want out of that player.
Yeah, 100%. I think and maybe we should be better at this given that figuring out what they're going for. But I think and then sometimes they get a little unpredictable because like Ty Simpson at the end of the day, the only part that really does fit into the typical Rams archetype, obviously outside of the fact that just like nobody saw quarterback coming, he hasn't played that much football. I think like that's one of the things that stands out is like that's usually a Snead and McVay qualifier is like a guy who's played a lot of ball, a guy who is pretty experienced. That tends to be something they like in their resume as you like look across this entire draft class that they put together this year. It's 7th year senior in Keegan Trows, 6th year senior in CJ Daniels, guys who've played tons and tons of football. Tim Keenan, I think, has 30 some odd starts with various programs. So all of these guys, Nakai Hill Green in the undrafted free agent class has played like 40 games. So like they like a guy who's played a lot of ball, but then Ty Simpson comes in as this bit of a different archetype. So the more I watch him, the more I realize like why they're falling in love with him. But that immediately stood out to me as like, okay, we're drafting a quarterback, but it's not even like really the quarterback that I kind of expected. Cause I thought they would take a quarterback in this year's class and I thought it was going to be Garrett Nussbaum. That was my assumption coming into the class. I thought he fit more into the usual Rams draft archetype. But the more I watch Ty Simpson, the more I do think I am starting to figure out exactly like what attracted Sean and Les to him.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he reminds me a lot of like Kirk Cousins in a way, just in the way that he's able to kind of push the ball down the field and make those reads. But that's why I feel like maybe Sean McVay liked him because that was like his first quarterback as an OC and a tight ends coach was Kirk Cousins. And I did see a lot of comparisons before the draft of the draft comp for Ty Simpson was Jared Goff, just like a more mobile Jared Goff. And I was like, I kind of can see that honestly, but I think in a way that Jared Goff processes is really great. And I think that's what made him so good in the McVay system. He's able to get the ball, out to whoever, but he just didn't have that clutch factor like Matthew Stafford has. But
yeah.
I think when you look at Ty Simpson, you said he's inexperienced and he only played, I think it was 15 games at Alabama, but he has the time. And that was probably the other reason that made them pick him in the first round is you get that 5th year option as well for, whenever he wants to start, you get a cheap quarterback for a while. And I think that was another probably big reason that they wanted to go first round instead of maybe third round Nussmeier or fourth round Drew Aller.
Yeah, I think that definitely factors into it. Like as you get into those more high level contract conversations. And I think and that's something that I think is worth discussing in relation to Matthew Stafford as well. Obviously, the Rams currently embroiled in a contract extension negotiation with Stafford. No clue when that deal is going to come, but it does seem like it is coming at some point. We've heard multiple reports that it is a true extension of his contract rather than like kind of last year's renegotiation that we saw where they gave him a little bit more money, but didn't really like extend the deal. I expect that they'll probably tear up the voids on his current contract to clean up the dead cap, give him an extension that probably makes him the highest paid QB in the league. But I think ultimately you have to wonder like for how long. In the context of that, obviously you want Stafford to play for as long as Stafford wants to play for, as if he's going to play at this type of level. But you do have Simpson on the roster now. He has to be a part of the plan. He has to be part of the process in the way you make decisions. And if you give Stafford 3 more years, you've limited yourself to a 1-year sample of Ty Simpson before making a 5th-year option decision. And that 5th-year option is not likely to be cheap. That's going to be a $35 million likely plus single-year deal to keep Simpson around and to continue evaluating him, or you're going to have to give him a long-term extension right then and there. And so I think it becomes a question for the Rams and for Matthew Stafford of how much longer can we go with this now that we have made our decision that Simpson is our successor? And does that timetable work for Stafford? Like, is there a chance that Stafford wants to play longer than the Rams are comfortable with because they now have Simpson and they need to figure out what they have in him before they have to make a contract decision?
Yeah.
I think like that's
I do think it puts a little bit of pressure on it because when you think about it, let's do some simple math here. Stafford's a free agent after this season. So he plays this season. That's rookie year for Simpson. Next, let's say he gets a 2-year extension. That's 3 years. So maybe then he takes over his 4th year, 5th year. Like that's a long time for him to ride the bench like that. And I feel like when you're picked in the first round, like there definitely is a little bit of pressure, almost like he's breathing down his neck a little bit, saying like, I'm coming for your job soon in a way.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think if you're the Rams, like, and that wouldn't be an unprecedented journey for a quarterback. Jordan Love very recently went on the exact same journey. And for the Packers, that worked. The Packers were able to work off of a 1-year sample of Jordan Love, pick up the 5th-year option, and then get a long-term deal done with him. That made him the highest paid quarterback in the league at that point. So far, so good as far as the Jordan Love camp is concerned. So if you're the Rams, I think you have to kind of hope that things play the same way if Matthew Stafford wants to play 3 years. But then like, here's the horror story, right? Like if you get to year 4 and Simpson plays and he isn't good, that's extremely problematic. I mean, if he's outright bad, then maybe the problem solves itself because you're just like, okay, then he's not the answer. But if he's showing flashes but isn't quite there yet, then it's like, do we pick up the 5th-year option with him? Or do we try to give him a 1-year extension that's maybe like a $20 million deal just for 1 more year before then we make a long-term extension contract? Like, I think it just creates a number of scenarios for the Rams that are less than ideal, I guess, as you start to try to map out what Simpson's career in Los Angeles.
Because I feel like if he's not ready to start by the time they're ready to pick up his 5th-year option, then I feel like
that's a huge concern.
I feel like then you've spent kind of 3 years, 4 years, whatever, doing nothing almost. Because if you're Ty Simpson, your whole job right now is sit behind Matthew Stafford, who just won the MVP, learn from, Sean McVay, Dave Ringo, like those guys, and you will take over by your 4th year. Like that is the expectation, I feel like, coming into the building. And if that's not the case, like that's a big problem. That's a Trey Lance level problem here, almost.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to doom and gloom about Ty Simpson, but I do think it is worth considering the many outcomes and the way that as the Rams make this decision with Matthew Stafford, that thought process has to be on the mind for them. I don't think you can make really any decisions going forward without factoring Ty Simpson. Like he has to be a part of the way you do everything because he is your franchise quarterback for the future. And you have to treat him
Absolutely.
that way. I mean, if you're investing a 13th overall pick in a kid, like he's the future, and we've got to make decisions with respect to what we believe our future to be. So I think it'll be a very interesting process of how that affects the deal that the Rams are inclined to give Stafford. If I'm the Rams, I would honestly prefer it be a 2-year contract. As much as that's
Yeah.
interesting,
That seems good.
it gives you
Like, I feel
freedom,
like
it gives you flexibility.
then at the same time, to play a little devil's advocate, if they win the Super Bowl this year, how awesome would that be to him for just him to ride off into the sunset in Los Angeles? He finished his career as a Ram. Devontae Adams has also said that he wants to retire with Stafford. So what if those two just finish their careers this year with a Super Bowl win?
Hey, I mean, I'll take the ring and we'll see you, gentlemen. It's been
You're
an
not
awesome
complaining.
ride.
Yeah.
I don't think like as a Rams fan, you could be upset at any point if those guys decided to hang it up. I mean, they are
Yeah.
both first ballot Hall of Famers. Devontae, obviously, for much more than what he has been able to accomplish and hopefully will be able to accomplish with us. Stafford, I think, really cemented it here in Los Angeles. And I think as a Rams fan, you just have to be like, tip your cap to those guys in their effort, especially if they were able to get one more for us. But then I mean, like, hey, Simpson show now and in a quicker turnaround than maybe was expected. So that would be, I think, like if you're the Rams, and I hate to say, if you win the Super Bowl and send Stafford off and Devontae off, I think that's kind of your perfect world of like, hey, like let's
Yeah.
roll into the Simpson era. It begins in 2027. He got 1 year to sit behind Matthew Stafford, to learn from Sean McVay, the red shirt season, as it were. But now let's find out, like, who are you, man? Like, time to show it. And I think that would maybe be the perfect world. As much as it would be hard to say goodbye to Matthew Stafford, I think you'd have to be just grateful for what he was able to offer and understanding of like, hey, he's committed a lot of time and there's definitely health questions with him long term with the back. Obviously, he was able to hold up last season, but
Crazy. I know.
yeah,
People were saying, I saw somebody said that the number one concern like last season around this sort of time, almost getting into the summer and camp, was Matthew Stafford's not going to play. Oh my gosh. Like, what are they going to do without Matthew Stafford? And now people are saying the exact opposite. Like, they have Matthew Stafford. What do they need Ty Simpson for? So
yeah,
I think like 2 years ago, even when I first got to go to training camp, Stafford didn't throw at all. And we were like is that just like him taking rest? Like what was going on? And it was just the Jimmy G show. This past season, it was the Jimmy G show the whole entire time of training camp because Stafford was out. And then he had that like strange, like one-on-one throwing session right afterwards. He was in that immortal chamber for a while. Like it was such a weird situation. And then just like randomly out of the blue, he just starts playing at an MVP level. It was pretty crazy.
yeah. I mean, I remember it all got so weird. People were like, he's dead, and they replaced him with a clone.
There's even a point where they were like, maybe Aaron Rodgers is going to have to step up and be the Rams quarterback now. Because I don't even know where that even came from, but I thought that was really funny last season too. And I was like, I don't know how you even come up with that kind of rumor.
I was messing with my buddy, who I sit next to at work, Jack Sperry, who hosts our Steelers channel, the big Rodgers fan. I was like, well, Rodgers is actually coming home to LA. He's going to be the backup for Matthew Stafford this year. Just giving him a hard time.
Backup would be. I don't think Aaron Rodgers could put his ego aside and be a backup.
Yeah, I was just giving him a hard time. That'd be wild. That would be wild. Him coming in. I just want a ring chase. I'm just going to back up Stafford this year.
That would be funny. And Jimmy G is a whole nother situation too, because they're obviously not bringing him back at this point. I feel like, you have Stetson, you have Stafford, and you have Simpson. That's your QB room for the year. That's pretty much set. I feel like most of the roster as a whole is pretty much set. Like there's maybe, you're looking at second and third stringers that are up for debate, but I mean, your starters they're all set pretty much. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think like obviously the battle for receiver 3, I think might be the most interesting competition on the roster this season.
Yeah.
And that just speaks to how set it is. And how like guys have their roles. Obviously there's new guys coming in, but it's tough to project day one impact for a lot of the rookies that we drafted. I kind of said over and over again, the theme with that draft class is eventually these guys are going to be really big impact makers, but it's not going to be in 2026 for the vast majority of them. I think maybe CJ Daniels, Max Clare, they have the highest likelihood to get impact roles. Where Trost ultimately lands will be an interesting question with that rookie class and on the depth chart. But as far as just like depth chart battles, there just really are not too many that are major question marks.
Yeah.
As you roll through
One of
it.
the ones that I thought was pretty interesting was Ronnie Rivers and Hunter, because
Yeah, that
really
is fair.
that third running back position, he didn't get a single carry at all last season. And Hunter they picked him, was it third round last year?
Fourth.
Was he fourth round? Yeah, he was a fourth round pick last year. And I think that him as a player coming out of college was like they drafted him in a way that he was sort of different, like a different style of running back compared to Williams and Corum, because those two are pretty much like the same guy. Like we were even getting him confused because they both wear similar numbers in training camp. And they play like pretty identically. They kind of knew what they were getting when they drafted Corum, and they were like, let's just get another one of these guys that we like. So I think that he's a little bit more of a hard nosed north south runner. I feel like he flashed a good amount in training camp, but when I spoke with him, I was kind of asking like, how do you sort of compete in this running back room, but at the same time, you're all teammates at the end of the day, because that's a really interesting dynamic. I always feel like when you have position battles like this is, you're trying to earn a job, but at the same time, those are like you guys are all on the same team at the end of the day. So he was telling me that it's ultimately just about, controlling what you can control. And at the end of the day, you just, how much work you put into it is how much work you're going to get out of it, which I thought was a really great answer, because this is the Rams. This is not, they're not trying to like be against each other in a way, but I think that he'll probably contribute in maybe some double wide back spots, or maybe punt return. I don't know. It's hard to project what his role is. Same thing with Rivers, because Rivers is a little bit more of a special teams guy than he is. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
I hate to say it. I do think Hunter's kind of a roster bubble candidate. As much as I don't love that. It was a little bit surprising to me that he had no role last year.
Yeah.
I expected him to have a small role. I did not expect him to be like a change of pace back for Kyren at all, but I expected him to get some work, and for him to get no work, it's there's just not a great track record of like running backs who get zero work in year one or very little work in year one and then go on to have incredibly successful careers. And obviously breaking that mold, or I'm having a little bit more success. But you do question like, why was he unable to break into this at all? You feel like the Rams would have been inclined to give him more opportunities over Rivers last season, but they didn't go that road. They brought Rivers back. They could have let Rivers walk. They brought in Dean Connors as well as a UDFA to add a little bit more to that room, just to get another opportunity. They didn't bring anybody in as a UDFA in the receiver room, which I also found interesting. Unless I'm forgetting somebody off my head. But I do find it a question mark of, I don't know if Dean Connors makes this final roster. I think he's there to compete in rookie minicamp, but they keep adding running backs. They keep looking at running back. They didn't want to let Ronnie go. I think Ronnie ultimately has a stronger chance of making this roster at this point than I would say Hunter.
Just because he has that special teams value, like I said.
Yeah.
And I think obviously if they went and signed him again and didn't let him hit the open market, that means that they have, some sort of desire to have him on the roster. So I mean,
there's when you discomfort with giving Hunter more right now.
I think it's just a rookie thing, honestly, because when you look at the rookies in the Sean McVay era, like not a lot of them are really that impactful. Like, I mean, Terrence Ferguson got like some work last year, but he was still, tight end. He probably would have been tight end 3 if Tyler Higbee hadn't went down earlier in the year. Like, I don't think that he got like that much. I think he had to earn they all have to kind of earn the trust. And I think part of that also is just how complex the like offensive and defensive playbooks are, from what I've heard from players and other people, is that it just takes them a while to sort of get acclimated to the way that the Rams run things, which I guess kind of makes sense. But then, I mean, I feel like maybe if Sean McVay is this supposed offensive guru, like he should find a way to get these rookies involved. But maybe that's also just because, like we talked about earlier, that this roster is just so stacked and like set in its ways that when you add someone new into it, like it's just not, they can't even carve out work from, the people that are in front of them on the depth chart.
Yeah, I think rookie work it's a point of contention with a lot of Rams fans, but I truly don't see it that way, to be completely honest with you. I've seen so many examples of rookies becoming day one contributors for McVay. I mean, Puka reset the rookie record book. Steve Avila is a day one starter at guard. Kobe Turner came in and got day one work. Byron Young was a day one starter. A lot of these guys in the 2023 draft class, especially when the Rams need to do it, they will draft day one help. But generally, because of their ability to lean on veterans and their strategy of leaning on veterans primarily, they don't need to as often put rookies in positions to contribute. But if rookies earn their keep, they get their spots and they get their opportunities. Cooper Kupp had 880 yards his rookie season. So I think like it does come down to just who you are, not when you got here. And if you can earn it, and to your point, a lot of that is about the complexity of the scheme. So you've got to be a sponge if you're a rookie. You've got to be willing to work hard and outwork other guys who've been here for longer and might have a little bit more established cachet than you do. But it's absolutely possible. We've seen guys work their way into starting roles. But like, again, I think the Rams, unless Snead says, I don't draft with a timetable for guys. I think he does. I think it's okay to say that he does too. I don't know why he doesn't want to. I think it's fine.
That's not necessarily like a bad thing either, to draft to fill your holes. But I mean, that's just how in general, like a GM should work, is you draft to fill your, some of your draft is to fill, the holes that you get, those immediate contributors that can start on day one. And then, the other part of your draft is just looking towards the future and more developmental. That's kind of what those later round picks are for most teams, is sort of developmental guys that maybe in their third or fourth year they can contribute and start. But I think the way that they've drafted in the past couple of years, just the past 2 years in general, has sort of been more future forward than in previous years, just because that's the way that the roster is, shaping up and looking like.
Yeah, 100%. I think the Rams primarily, I think one thing that's also worth remembering in this whole conversation, just in general in the draft, the vast majority of guys on day 3 do not become successful contributors with NFL teams. It is tough to hang on in the NFL with any team, but I think especially with the Rams. And I think part of that is just how set the roster is. Like we've been saying, the Rams know what they want, but sometimes guys don't earn their keep. And I think Hunter was, to your point, kind of an experiment in a different archetype at running back, and whether or not that would work. And I have noticed McVay and Snead, they talk about learning from mistakes. I don't know if they'd necessarily tell you that that was a mistake, but maybe it does prove to eventually be one that, like, hey, we need to kind of stick within our archetype at running back if we're going to have guys that become contributors. Because, and again, it's tough to know what they were looking for with Hunter because they haven't used him to do anything yet.
That's true.
Until they do.
Maybe they drafted him as like maybe if Corum doesn't have the year that he had last year, he might have gotten more work. Like, we don't know that. And obviously that's not a situation that happened, but maybe they were thinking, if Corum doesn't get up to speed, we have this other guy that maybe can come in and contribute and be this like sort of third guy in rotation. But I think it's hard to get 3 running backs in any offense in a rotation, because when you have a guy like Kyren Williams, who many Rams fans are not going to say is top 10. I think when you have a guy like him, it's hard not to give him at least, 60, 70% of your volume at running back. And then that leaves your second guy with only 20, 30, 40%. And then your third guy, what does your third guy get? Like a sliver of that even?
Yeah, definitely. And that is how it shaked out for the Rams last year.
Yeah.
Shook out really is probably the more grammatically correct way of saying that. But I think, to get back to the timetables conversation that we were having, I'd lost my train of thought, but I just rediscovered it here. I think Snead often talks about not drafting with a timetable, but I think this year he really did. I think in his perfect world, none of these guys contribute in year one. And most of them, except for maybe CJ Daniels, most of them are kind of stash players to be there as injury insurance, to be there for the future. And I think Hunter maybe had a similar vision. Hey, year one for Hunter, there's not going to be a big role for him. And then maybe in year 2, he steps up. I don't know that that's the case, but I think that is a possibility, is that was maybe a almost intentional mechanism of drafting him. But then I think that naturally begs the question of, why do you keep around Ronnie? If that was the case.
I mean, I think from what I've heard from guys and just like general interviews I've had around the league, special teams value is huge. And I think if you're a good special teams player, like that is the way you make it onto the roster as like a later round pick or undrafted free agent, is just be good at special teams. And I think that he's pretty good at special teams from what I've seen. I mean, it's hard to tell, on kickoff and everything. I'll be honest, I'm not watching special tape film. I don't know if anyone in the media really does, aside from like, the special teams coaches. I don't think a lot of people are watching special teams film. But I think from what I've seen from him in like punt return and stuff is he's pretty good. He's not bad. He's not amazing, but he's like a solid, sound guy. Like he's not gonna fumble the ball. I know that might be a little bit of a sore subject, but I think that he's just kind of like a good player, like a good football player. Like he's not amazing, but he's not gonna, lose the ball, lose the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something else that's worth considering beyond maybe even the special teams value of it is running back is a position at which depth is incredibly important.
Yeah.
It is. If you charted it out, I bet you injuries occur at the running back position just as, if not more frequently than any other position in the NFL, just by its very nature. It's a lot of hits low on guys. You're running between the tackles. It's a lot of contact from different angles. So having a stable of rooms, as people often use that phrase, or a stable of guys in a room that you trust to take carries if your lead back goes down or if your secondary back goes down, to have somebody step in, be that secondary back. I think maybe even more so than other positions. That is an incredibly important role of being even the third or fourth back, because if injuries come up, which they are, I hate to say, I mean, honestly, more likely than not to, by and large, across the NFL, you got to be ready.
Yeah, absolutely. That just reminded me of something that I remember from last year's camp. Was in one of the press conferences we had with Coach McVay. He was saying that one of the main reasons that they signed DJ Humphries was because they probably knew that going into the year, like they were going to have to play an additional lineman. Like someone was going to get hurt. That's pretty much like a guarantee to him. And that was ended up being what happened. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's unfortunately a bad reality where you have to just like in regards to that, plan around playing like six, seven linemen to like start the year. And I think that when you look at Kevin Dotson, you look at Avila, all of them have some sort of injury history. And that's unfortunate when, guys can't play a full season, obviously, but having that depth, like you just mentioned, is important for any position. And I think that is sort of what we're talking about, is you want to kind of target, future starters, quality depth, is I think that a phrase that I've heard being thrown around a little bit. And I think that perfectly fits what, they're trying to do with this past draft.
Yeah, I think along the offensive line is another great point. Like the running back room where injuries frequently come up there. And I mean, the Rams went out and tried to address that this year with the guy Keegan Trost. I like that pick a lot, primarily because he can play a variety of different positions. Obviously, he played literally every spot along the offensive line other than center. In college, played at a bunch of different schools, bunch of different levels. And whether or not he's able to do that at the NFL level remains to be seen. I know there's a lot of evaluators have question marks about whether or not he's going to be able to be a full-time tackle at the NFL level. I think he's at least a spot start guy. If you have injuries, he's played right tackle, he's played left tackle for you. I think he can slide into either of those spots. I don't think you want him as a 17-game starter at those positions. Yeah. Definitely not from
I think
one.
Dedich was kind of that same. Dedich and Bo Limmer are kind of in that same vein as well, sort of guys that can plug a little bit anywhere. Bo Limmer was an interesting one as well. But I think when you look at his play from his rookie year, he played pretty well in his rookie year, but obviously they weren't confident enough that they had to go and sign Coleman Shelton back. But I think he's another guy that maybe could take that extra step if someone goes down to play guard or even center if Shelton goes down.
Yeah, Limmer, I feel like had such a great regular season and then struggled towards the end of the year. And that's kind of what gave them pause. And I think Dedich, he really struggled in relief of Dotson. They tendered him to come back for another year, but I do think that was a big part of why they drafted Trost, was we don't want to see out there again. If we do have an injury at that position, we want to be able to try something different, because that didn't go very well.
I know. And then they let, who was the guy that they let go to the Eagles that he played really well in preseason? I forgot his name.
Also slipping mine off the dome. Somebody along the line that went to the
Yes, there was someone on the line. He played really well in preseason, and then they let him go to the Eagles practice. The Eagles poached him from the practice squad and then put him like immediately on IR or something like that. I'm forgetting his name.
I just need to slip it.
But I feel like he would have been was it Willie Lampkin?
Lampkin, yeah. Man, I totally forgot about Lampkin.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you want, again, quality depth like that. The Eagles, a franchise that does such a great job of
in the
ensuring
trenches.
that the trenches are sound and not just along the starting level. And I think a big part of why they do that is like, look what they did in the draft this year. And I knew that he was going to end up there. They get that dude from Nigeria, Bar Bernard. I don't know if you heard about
Man,
him, but that
that
unbelievable
was
athlete.
crazy. I saw that he had measurables like similar to Miles Garrett, and I was like, man, that's insane.
Yeah. And I mean, like, obviously, dude has barely played football. So, like, who knows what he's going to be? But, like, if any franchise was going to take a chance, of course it was Philadelphia, like, who turned Jordan Mailata from being pretty much unfamiliar with football outside of watching the Super Bowl once annually into a all-pro tackle. So we'll see what they can do
Yeah,
this time. And I, and part of me wishes the Rams would take some chances like that sometimes and trust their own development process a little bit more to swing on guys like that. But that hasn't really been the style. It's worked out for them. But in the same way, this has worked out for the Eagles. So I feel like you can get a little bit of both. You can get a little spicy with it sometimes.
yeah. Zooming out, what pick would you say was your favorite? And then, like, who would you say that they're kind of sleeping on right now? Because I feel like we kind of covered all the picks so far.
What pick was my favorite? That's a really good question. I think I'm
Yeah.
caught between two. Right now, I get really excited about Trost when I watch him
Mhm.
and how good he was at Missouri last season. And I know that's probably not exciting for a lot of people, which is why I'm going to have another one in there. But Trost took such a big step forward last year at Missouri. It gets you excited because 24 years old, that shouldn't be what you do. You know what I mean? Like at 24 years old, you should be kind of already maxed out. Coming up to the SEC level versus the ACC, that should have been a big challenge for him. He should have struggled a little bit. That would have been what you expected, but he defies profile, defies expectations, and turns in the best season of his career. That gets you excited about like, hey, this dude responded to an increase in challenge with an increase in performance, and not just a small one, but a massive jump in his performance and a massive jump in the quality of his play, turning in by far the best year he was able to play, showing, hey, 4 years of quality development have really started to come together, competing at the SEC level with a guy who got drafted in the second round, if I remember correctly, in Zion Young. That came together as well. So Trost gets me really excited. I think he's going to establish a nice niche for himself on this team, even if it isn't necessarily as a starter early on. And then people, they'll feel some type of way about I love Ty Simpson at this point. I'm really on board.
Yeah.
I think he's right there for me with what he can be in the long term for this team, as well as answering the depth question that you obviously had. Because people don't like that I feel this way. I'm not a Stetson Bennett guy. If I was making roster decisions, Stetson Bennett would have been cut a couple years ago. I'm not going to lie about it. I don't see much.
I mean, I think part of the reason he's stuck around was because number one, he's still on his rookie deal. I mean, where else can you get a cheap quarterback like that? Number two, I think they just have liked having three quarterbacks, especially with like the injury history of Jimmy G and Stafford as well. Like I've had some injury history and they don't want to have, like you said, another 2022. But I feel like the experiment has not worked out with him. And I think that as soon as they're not keeping him as soon as the rookie deal is over. Like I think it was just like let's ride out the rookie deal. As soon as that's done, he's gone. Like I don't think they're going to keep him afterwards.
From the day we drafted Stetson Bennett, I will say I was never on board. I remember when that pick got announced, I was like, no, in the fourth round. I was very surprised that we took him that early. Obviously, he has the national championships on his resume, but I really feel like none of the profile ever projected as like an NFL starter or even quality NFL backup.
There's a certain opinion that I have for all of those SEC, like Alabama, Georgia guys. And I don't know if you can let me know if this is a good opinion. I don't think that any one of those Alabama or, touted program quarterbacks are particularly that good because you have them throwing to guys like Mac Jones's wide receiver room was like Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, and Jerry Jeudy. Like his three wide receivers were all like first round picks. And his offensive line, like their whole team is just stacked. It's the same thing with Georgia that year. Their whole team was insanely stacked. But at the same time, you can also see from the other side and say, opposing defenses were just as equally stacked. it kind of goes both ways, but I think that when you're throwing to a wide receiver room of first round picks and your running backs go in the first round as well, like I don't see how that can not make you look bad.
Yeah, I think what's also a tie that binds the two programs that you mentioned, Alabama and Georgia, and why I would not maybe hold on to that take too tightly is they have both been coached for a long time by defensive minds.
That could be it.
Obviously, DeBoer took over for Nick Saban, but Saban for years was running the show at Alabama. That's a defensive mind, primarily one of the NFL's greatest ever, or one of the football's greatest ever, really more accurately, not really the NFL. But and then Kirby Smart at Georgia, defensive coordinator who used to work under Nick Saban at Alabama. So I think at the end of the day, it's tough for those programs that you're not getting like super high quality head coaching quarterback development at those programs.
Yeah.
Neither of
That
those
could have been part of it
guys
too, but then
are
I look at some of those guys
ruining
that came out of
pennies.
those programs. You have Mac Jones, which obviously didn't work out. Bryce Young, he's doing pretty good, I think. And then Jalen Hurts doing pretty good, I would say. I would say he's top 10, but I don't know. That's just a take that I've personally had. Maybe that's just because I'm more of a college football casual than other people, but I don't think that anything is particularly impressive when you're throwing to guys that are first round picks. Like just have that level of talent.
Yeah, I think it definitely has to factor into the conversation. I think at the end of the day, if you want to talk about Ty himself, who obviously would have to be considered in this conversation as he definitely
Yes.
checks the boxes, his receiving talent, not especially excellent. I mean, Jeremy Bernard, solid player. Outside of that, Ryan Williams took a major step back. Latsier Brooks was a true freshman. He had a nice role that he was able to carve out. And then I'm off the dome. I'm slipping that other kid that had a decent amount of production for them. I'm going to have to look it up because it's going to bother me if I don't. But nobody in that room was like, oh, wow, that's the guy. Like, wow, that dude's unbelievable. Like Jeremy Bernard obviously had a little bit of second round buzz in this year's draft, but not a overwhelming number one. Ryan Coleman Isaiah Horton. That is exactly who I was thinking of. Isaiah Horton, the Miami transfer. Oh, a lot of guys who I think underperformed their own expectations, other than Jeremy Bernard, who I think you could maybe say overperformed his. But it doesn't always go that way. You know what I mean? For a program like Alabama, like they don't always have that number one receiver who just jumps off the page for you.
Yeah, maybe that's different. In these last couple of years with DeBoer versus Saban too, as well.
Yeah,
We'll just have to see. This is a waiting game with him, and I think this will have to be a waiting game for all the Rams fans to start to dog on Ty Simpson before he even gets to play a full game. Before we wrap up here, what is one hot take you have for the Rams upcoming next season?
Go with. I think we will see Ty Simpson start at least one game in 2026.
We get the last week prediction.
It'll either be a week 18.
Yeah, I could see it.
Or it'll be worse because of a Stafford injury. But I think there is a good enough chance of one of those two outcomes occurring that we do end up seeing Ty maybe before people.
And then this is a question that I ask all of my guests. What's something that you have learned either from playing sports or watching football that you think that everyone can apply as like a life lesson in their lives?
That is a really good question. I didn't really play football at that high of a level, but I played water polo for a long time. And I think just being a part of a team, if you want to take on a leadership role in anything that you do, and I learned this primarily through water polo, but I think it applies in life and just in general. If you are in a leadership role, if you want to take on a leadership role, I think the biggest thing that sports will teach you is you can never ask people to do something that you would not do yourself. And that applies both to the way you practice, the way you go about your games, but also your mentality. If you do not truly believe that your team or that your goals are worth or capable of being accomplished, your team will see that. You are asking your team to do something that you would not ask yourself to do. So if you are going to set goals for your team, you have to truly believe, hey, we can achieve this. This is something we can do. And I think your team looks to you if you're in a leadership role So just kind of understanding, like, I model what everyone else needs to see. If you want to be a leader, that needs to be a huge part of it.
Yeah, that's a great one. And then where can people find your content? Plug your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rams Report is the primary one. We're on YouTube, the Rams Report by Chat Sports. I'm on Instagram, just my name, Jackson Durham. We're also on Instagram or on Twitter, just my name, Jackson Durham. And then I'm on Instagram at the Rams Report as well. I do have a personal Instagram, but you can find it in the Rams Report bio. And then I'm on TikTok as well, just my name, Jackson Durham, and you'll find me. Definitely appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you coming on. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along so you don't miss what's coming next. New episodes are dropping at least bi-weekly with more players, draft prospects, and guess all offseason. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram at Football by Nico. And if you made it this far, share the show with someone who loves LA football. Appreciate you for listening.